Good afternoon. After hearing about and from our first two honorees, I feel like there might have been one mistake in this selection committee this year. I don't think I'm in that league, but nevertheless, I thank the trustees for this recognition. It means an awful lot to my family and to me, and especially my grandchildren who believe all my Army war stories, some of which are actually true. You know, from having sat where you guys are sitting today, I know that life after the Army is just the last thing on your mind. It doesn't even make the list. But as the good book says, this too, like all things, shall pass, and that includes your military career. As I stand here today, I've been out of the Army longer than I was in the Army. And if you have good genes and good luck, you might be standing here someday too. Okay? For many of you, it's going to be a long time before you have to worry about it. But at some point in time, if you survive, you're going to have to think about another career. And if you have independently wealthy or if you're married well, you'll be set. But otherwise, you may have to look for another job. So what advice do I have for you today? None. Who am I to be giving advice to the best and brightest that the Army has to offer? And besides, there are too many of you and too many variables for me to give any kind of meaningful career advice en masse. But being somewhat of a prognosticator, I can predict that a few of you will go on to be captains of industry and manage large corporations. But most of you will find some other way to serve your country, your state, your community, or mankind in general, either in paid or volunteer positions. Service is just in your blood, and you'll find a way. So when the time comes, the opportunities will be there. And sometimes if you see, they'll come looking for you. When I was on active duty with the Army Reserve, I didn't have to look for the next job. I had it all along because when I resigned my regular Army commission years ago to go to law school, I pursued a dual career as a full-time lawyer and as a part-time soldier. When I graduated from law school, my goal was not to make a lot of money, but to become known as the best lawyer in the state of Alabama. I partially achieved that goal. I didn't make a lot of money. I probably could have made more money if I'd concentrated on just being a lawyer, but being a soldier, even a part-time soldier, was just too much fun to give up. You know, I forgot one more thing. When your pay grade is your students, at your pay grade, military jobs often come looking for you before you can come looking for them. The same thing happens to you in the civilian world. Sometimes opportunities for service come looking for you too. And I want to give you the example of one that happened in my career. In late 2005, I was pushing 65 years old. I was long since retired from the Army. I was semi-retired from the practice of law. And one evening at a fundraiser for the then sitting Governor Bob Riley, as I went over to shake his hand, he took me by the arm and led me to a side room. And he got right to the point. I'd done some stuff with the governor's office a year before on the Phoenix City store, as she mentioned, but I didn't know he knew my name. But once we got down there, he got right to the point. He said, there's a vacancy in the directorship of the Alabama Historical Commission, and I wanted to see if you'd be interested in that job. Before I could mutter much of a response, he said, take a couple of weeks and think it over and come back and see me. So he went back to his reception, and I kind of eased out a side door. The next day, I did my due diligence, and I called a lawyer for the commission who had worked with me in the Attorney General's office, and he said, well, they're always short of money, but basically it's a low-stress environment. Well, after 3 or 4 more phone calls to confirm that, I was hooked. I was going to take that job. As I was shown back into the governor's office a couple of weeks later, I was greeted warmly by the governor. I went back in to tell him I was going to accept the position. And the governor said, well, you know, smiling all the time, I don't really control that commission. But what I need is a prison commissioner. Now, I'm not the brightest bulb in the pack, but I had enough knowledge to know that the prison commissioner job was considered the hardest and most undesirable job in state government. The prisons were always underfunded, overcrowded, understaffed, and always in trouble with the federal courts. Pretending not to be stunned, well, first I'd never set foot in a prison. and I didn't know anything about running a prison system. So pretending not to be stunned, I suggested to the governor a couple of names of other folks that might do a better job. The governor stood fast. Inexplicably, he said he wanted me. Again, he said, take a couple of weeks and think it over and come back to me. After a few days of very frantic due diligence, I discovered that the prison system had more problems and in worse shape than I thought it was. So naturally, I took the job. You know, it's kind of like it's just, the challenge was just too delicious to pass up. You've got to do it when something like that comes to you. It's kind of like if you've ever been asked to take over a unit where the previous commander has been relieved for poor performance. You know, it may be a little queasy, but you just have to go and do it. When I got to the Department of Corrections, though, I felt that my Army training, my experience in the Army, and my experience as a civilian had prepared me for that job, and I feared no evil. By evil, I don't mean the prisoners in the prisons, prisoners, inmates in the prisoners. I meant the Alabama legislature. Did I solve all the problems? Absolutely not. But I fought the good fight for 5 years. I served for 5 years and wasn't fired. We didn't get hauled into federal court and taken over by the federal court system. So in Alabama, in the prison business, that's considered a success. Well, Colonel Collins told me to be sure to limit my remarks to 5 minutes, you know. And I tried to tell her when she called me, tell me about this, Honor, that, you know, no lawyer can say anything in 5 minutes. You can't give your name, rank, and service number in 5 minutes. And besides, lawyers have a constitutional right to ramble on and on. Colonel Collins said, I've read the Constitution. You got 5 minutes, Buster. Recommendation, don't ever argue with Colonel Collins. But I want to congratulate all you members of the War College class of 19. I think you'll find that when the Army, you know, uses you up and puts you out to pasture, there'll be plenty of opportunities out there. Jobs will come looking for you too. And I do remember one word of advice I want to give you guys through your retirement years. Listen carefully. Never pass up a clean latrine.